Okay.
Now we're good.
Hi, I'm Cindy Eckhoff of Smart Silhouette. If you've had just joining us, we've had some technical difficulties this morning, but we're rocking and rolling now. My name is Cindy Eckhoff. My blog is called Smart Silhouette, where I share tutorials on how to use the Silhouette machines and software and materials. I'm also a teacher at the All Things Silhouette conferences, and I used to be a customer support rep here at Silhouette America. We are here in Linden, Utah in the Silhouette America studios. If you hear a Southern accent in my voice, that's because I am originally from Texas. So let me show you a few of the fun things we're going to do today while you kind of get ready to go. We are going to do these cool shadow boxes. You can see that one there with some all white. I'll show you how to add some lights to that one. I'm also going to show you how to cut the Silhouette wood paper for doing this one, which is really cool. And then I'll show you some tricks for some other cardstock ones as well. One thing I did not list on our class materials is a ruler. So I would suggest you grab a ruler if you can. We are going to be using the free design of the week from the Silhouette Design Store. So let me show you where you can find that. Let's go into the Silhouette Design Store. Okay, and if I'm here in the Silhouette Design Store, I can look for the free design of the week. I'm going to click on that, and it's going to open up, show me that I can download that and purchase that file. Now, if you're looking at this at a later date, and you need to find that in the Silhouette Design Store, the name is Layered Deer. It is by Silhouette, that's the artist, and the ID number is 352881. So you can grab that and use that for our class today. All right, so let's go back to using our papers here. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do, I'm gonna start with the blank frame. And this frame is from Michaels. They come in a pack of 3 in the 8x8 size and a pack of 2 in the 12x12 size. They're the studio decor frames. I think this color is called gray. It's really nice for what this design is because it's got the wood look to it. So that's what I'm going to use. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is remove the back on this. I'm going to grab my spatula tool. That's extremely handy because it's got a nice flat edge. I'm going to be using it a lot today, actually. So I'm going to use this to lift the pieces out, and I'll show you why we're going to do this first. So I'm just going to move all the little metal pieces up, and I'm using my spatula instead of my fingernails, which I often do. Then I'm going to remove the backing. I think. There we go. Okay, and then so what we've got here is we've got this inner frame. What's cool about the inner frame is that you can leave it out, you can put it in, you can put your designs in front of it or behind it. But for right now, what we want to do is just take that out because we're going to measure the inside of the frame. So I'm going to grab my ruler, and mine is a square, and I can measure it and say, okay, I'm exactly at 8 inches square. If yours is not, you're using a different shadow box, just make sure that you measure the inside of your frame. We want the design to go all the way to the edges of the frame. Okay, so got that now. So that's the first step in preparation. Now that you know what size your frame is, then you can begin to pick out what papers you want to use. So let me show you a few of the things that I'm going to use. All right, let's move that one just out of the way for us. Now you can use any type of cardstock you want. You can use any color combo. So let me show you a few of the things that I'm going to use. Where did they go? First, I can use an all white paper here. Okay, that's what I used that first one out of. That's what we're going to start with today. So I'm going to leave that one here on my desk. If you are using colored papers and you want a monochromatic look, that's really cool. Let me show you one of those. Oops, in another folder. Oh, here we go. So here I got the Recollections cardstock from Michaels. I really like that. It cuts very well. And you see I've got a variation of grays here. If you're going to do something like this with a monochromatic look, what you're going to do is start with the darkest and go toward the lightest, because if you look in nature, you will see that as colors get farther away from you, farther in the background, they're lighter. So you start with your darkest color in front, and then you're going to gradually move to a lighter color. So that's how you can do a great monochromatic one. Now I want to show you some really fun ones from Michaels on this frame here. So we're going to show you this one. I have used a green cardstock and craft color. This brown one here is not actually what you think it is. It looks like this on the front, but I wanted really a nice dark deep brown, so I just flipped it over. So that was kind of fun. And then I used this amazing paper from Michaels. I really like this because the trees in this design remind me of aspen trees. And this looks just so much like aspen trees to me. I've used it a couple different times. There are some other ones you can see in the project here behind me. This time I used it in the background, and then I used some other wood textured papers from Michaels. So let me show you a few of those that they have. We've got this one here. This one's nice because it's in the 8.5 by 11 size. You want to zoom in on that for me? Ooh, it's hard on that color. There we go. Awesome. You've got a sort of a darker one, darker wood tone, and then a lighter wood tone. And I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see it on one of these. We've got, probably aren't going to be able to catch it. This one actually has a wood texture on it. It's very, very subtle. So if you want a more subtle look, you can use that one. Let's say you really liked the texture on this white and gold one, but you're not a fan of gold. You can actually just flip it over and get a very subtle look on that with just the texture. And I'll show you in a bit how you can actually add some color to it. So those are some of the fun things that we're going to do. And then one more item that we're going to use is the silhouette wood sheets. And this was actually the inspiration for this project for me. This is what they're going to look like in the store. And inside you're going to have 6 sheets of 8.5 by 11. That's why we're doing this one in an 8 by 8. And you get 3 different colors. Let's check my little project here again. And if you look at it, it looks like I have more than 3 colors. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So how did I do that with the wood sheets? That's later in the class. I'm going to teach you how to do that. But one tip I want to give you about these sheets, you want to leave these in the package until right when you're ready to use them. They can have a tendency to curl up, but if you leave them in the pack that has the packaging on it, the piece of cardboard in there, that's going to help a lot. So keep that in the pack for now if you're going to use those. Okay, now I'm going to show you one more thing. This is in preparation. This is our sheet again. A lot of times you'll have the UPC code for the paper on the edge of it. This one has a sticker on the back right here. So I want to make sure and remove that before I start cutting, because that's going to be a different thickness right there. I actually ran into that when I was cutting. I thought, why did this part not actually cut? It's because I had a sticker on that part of my paper. Grab a drink here because my voice is already going. Okay. Now that we've got that, let's get some of this out of the way. All right, so I'm going to start, like I said, with my white paper. I'm going to grab that. I'm going to go now into my Silhouette software. Okay, so in my library, I'm going to look for, I'm not showing my screen yet. Sorry, guys. Hang on. There we go. Okay, so in my library, I'm going to look for my design called Layered Deer, and I'm going to double click on that to put it on my design area. I'm starting with this one because I'm not going to need to resize it. You can cut it on any of the machines. You can cut it on the, excuse me, on the portrait because it is a little bit smaller and it fits very nicely in the 8x8 frame. So what I'm going to do is first put that right in the middle of my page and double check my size. It is on 8x8, so that's exactly what we want. If you're using a different frame and you need to change the size, you're going to go, let's see if we can move this little guy all the way. You're going to go up here in the quick access toolbar. Do you see this little lock symbol? It's right over here. I'm going to lock that so that if I change the height, the width will change proportionally. So say the inside of my shadow box was 7.5. So I'm going to click put in 7.5 inches. And that moved everything. You see, it did it all at once because they were all still selected. So that's a tip. Do them all at once, making sure that they're all centered together. Okay, now let me talk about a little bit about why I chose to do a single color here. Stop my sharing for just a sec. The reason I'm going to do the all white one first, or why I chose to do this, this looks extremely elegant when you just have one color like that. You put lights behind it, it's beautiful. It's great for Christmas time when you do it that way. I was mentioning this on Facebook the other day and a friend said, oh, that would be so pretty with glitter paper. Wouldn't that be just gorgeous at Christmas time? Now it doesn't have to be white. Let's look at a different color combination that I did. Here's one with all grays. And you see how, as I showed you before, the colors are going from darkest to lightest as you go back. So you have so much flexibility on what types of papers you want to do. And you can see that you're going to get a whole lot of different looks depending on which paper you pick. Okay, so
question.
Yes, question.
How big are the wood sheets that you purchased from Silhouette?
Excellent question. Those are 8.5 by 11, so letter size, which is perfect for what we're going to do because as we cut it, we do want a little bit of margin around. So our 8-inch shadow box, we're going to have be able to have a little bit of margin as we cut around the side because they are 8.5 by 11. So great question. Perfect. Okay, so now I'm going to share my screen again. Remember to do that. And I'm going to first of all take all my pieces off to the side just so I can work with one at a time. Now I'm going to start with the leaves. That would be my front piece. And let's say I want this, as I said, to be in the center of the page. You can see my media size is set for letter, so that it's the 8.5 by 11. And I want this to be centered on my page left or right. You may know that you can align different pieces together, but you can actually, if you click on one design, I'm going to go up to my quick access toolbar up here and click on Align Center. And that's going to align it on the page. When you only have one selected, it aligns it to the page. And then I'm going to scoot it up a little bit so that I have a little bit of room around. Okay. All right. Now I am going to move this one out of the way. I can show you that I'm going to load some of the white paper onto my mat. And I love to use a really clean new mat when I'm doing something sort of intricate like this. It's not as big of a deal on this cardstock, but when you're doing it on the wood paper, that's definitely going to make a difference. So I'm going to go ahead and load that into my machine. Okay, now let's go back for a minute to the software. Okay, I'm not getting the share screen option. I did something wrong here. Oh, there we go. Okay, so now that I've got this, I'm going to go into my send area, and I do want to start with a test cut. But I don't like the test cut location for the regular test cut in Silhouette. So instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is take my drawing tools and I'm going to draw a little square. I can draw it either right down here at the bottom of the page or even in the middle of the design, because I'm not going to be using that middle. And what I like about this is I can check it without having to unload and reload my map. So I'm going to put a little square right down there. I'm going to go into my send area. Now you can see that my leaves would cut, but really all I want to cut right now is my test square. So what I can do is select those leaves and then go over here and set it to no cut. Now it's still on the page and it's all aligned like I had it, but it's not going to cut. So I am going to start with I would suggest you start also with the cardstock plane setting. And I found by testing that I needed to take my blade up to a 4 and my force up to a 33. I'm using the Recollections cardstock from Michaels. I have loved this paper for years because I can always get beautiful cuts with it. So that's what we're going to do. I am going to send this to the machine and then see if we can get it real fast. Stop sharing my screen. Here, let me just do this so that we're ready to go on that. Okay, now you can see that that is going to do my test cut. Now you see how I can just lift that square out. Let's move my computer out of the way there. I can just lift the square out and I don't have to unload my machine. So that's a big time saver for me. I like that one. Okay, so now I am actually going to go back into my software. I'm going to show you that screen again. We're going to go back and forth a lot here, so hopefully you don't get dizzy. All right, so now what I can do is I can leave that little square there, or I can just set it to no cut and set my leaves to cut. Now I might leave that square on the page because maybe I'm using different brands of cardstock or different thicknesses, and I want to test each one. I'm a big proponent of test cutting. So I would suggest just leave it there and just set it to no cut. So now I am going to just send my leaves to cut. And I love the auto blade because I don't have to remember to set my my cut settings or anything, set my blade. Okay, while that's cutting away there, I want to show you something we're going to do over here. For this white cardstock, one that we're doing here, you can see that there's a little bit of depth to it. Okay, you can see that the layers are separated. So let me show you how we're going to add that depth. What is really handy, I think, is this adhesive craft foam from Michaels. It's a regular craft foam, but there's actually a carrier on the back so that the back side has some adhesive. Here we go. Okay, so you can just stick it onto things. Isn't that cool? So I could cut this on my machine, but I'm going to do some multitasking. So I'm going to grab my trimmer. And while my other pieces are cutting, I'm going to set this in here and I am going to use a scant 1/4 inch. Here's why. The outside frame on the design that we have in the 8x8 size is a little over 1/4 inch. It's like about a 5/8 maybe, or about a 3/8. But I want to cut some little foam strips that are slightly less than that. So I'm going to go to a scant 1/4 inch and just trim that all along the side of my craft foam. Okay, so now I have this strip. And I know the inside of my frame is 8 inches. So I'm going to cut this now at 8 inches. Okay, now I have this strip. What you're going to want for this one is, for the frame, is 4 at the 8 size, okay, at 8 inches. And then we're also going to do 4 at 7.5 inches. And here's why. When we begin to put it in our frame, we're going to put it along the top, and then we're going to have less room on the sides because that's taking up some of the top. So you've got 2 at a scant 8 inches and 2 at a scant 7.5 inches. So for a whole frame, because we're going to have 4 layers, then you're going to use 4 sets. Okay. So, and these little pieces, keep these around too, because I'm going to show you what we're going to do with those in a bit. All right. Another way that you can add dimension, if you don't have the craft sheets like this, you could actually use a regular craft foam. I like to match it to the color of my frame if I can, excuse me, the color of my cardstock, or something that blends really nicely. The adhesive craft foam comes in white and in black, okay? You could use a regular craft foam if you want to use a different color. You would just need to add some glue or some adhesive on that, okay? Another thing that you could use would be just the 1/4 inch wide tape, adhesive foam tape. This is the exact same thing. They've just already done the little cutting for you. And this does come at Michael's in a 1/4 inch. So that's kind of nice. The third option would be to use foam core board. Now, here's a little frame that I cut from foam core board. That would actually sit inside my frame to provide the spacing for dimension also. Okay, it's kind of nice because it's sort of rigid. It's just a little trickier to cut. So I'm not going to show you my X-Acto blade skills because I might cut myself. So what you would do for this is you would cut an 8-inch square, and then you would cut another square just inside it at a 1/4 inch away. So then you have this nice rigid frame. It does not have adhesive on it, but you don't need that because when it fits just inside the frame, it'll stay in place all by itself. Okay. So what I would do with this is I would just take my ruler, mark it off with a pencil, hold it down on my craft area, and then use an X-Acto knife right along the side of my foam core board. Okay. Foam core board comes in a lot of colors, but that's only on the outside. The inside is always going to be white. So keep that in mind. Okay. Our piece has finished cutting. Oh, I just did something I told you never to do. So let's put that back in for a sec. Let's pretend I didn't take that out. Even though we did a test cut, we always want to check to see if it cut before we take it out of the machine. Okay. So what I'm going to do is go over into one little corner here and lift it out. And yep, it's weeding just fine. So then I know I can unload. So that's what I always suggest doing, particularly if you're working with different materials or different colors of cardstock, different textures, different weights in your different levels of your shadow box. So always check that. I like to leave my paper on my mat to weed it because it's stiffer, so it's a little bit easier. Okay. I'm just going to weed some of this, and then I'm going to show you let's take the back off the background. Oh, look how nicely that cut. New mat, new blade, lovely. Okay, now, because this is a new mat, you may have seen this before that sometimes your paper will curl as you take it off. In fact, put that back up before. You see how this curled when I took it off the mat? Okay, here's a trick. You grab your mat cover because if your craft table is anything like mine, it's got a lot of mess on it. Okay, I'm going to put it here over this. This is just to cover the sticky area. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it over. Okay, and I'm going to begin to peel the mat up off of the paper. So now what's curling is my mat and not my design. Okay. Just going to go ahead and keep doing that. Let's grab this piece out of the way here. I'm just going to do it quick. I might rip some, but I would suggest you do it a little more carefully than I'm doing. This is somewhat of an intricate design, especially depending on what size you choose. So I can also use my little spatula tool to help. See how this leaf is kind of sticking and the rest is down? I don't want that to rip, so I can just slide my spatula tool in there to help me release that from the mat. Okay, another part there. See how that I can help release it from the mat. Just sticking that in there. One up here. All my leaves, we don't want them to stick. Now, I would be a little bit more cautious at home with this, but I want to get our class. I want to tell you so much today. Okay, and now I can probably flip it over and do the rest from the front side. I love the sticky mat and I hate the sticky mat sometimes, you know, love, hate. All right. And so now we've got our pieces cut and see how we have a lot less curl on this one. Where is it curling? It's curling at that side where I did not remove it as the mat was flipped over. So that's just a really good trick you can do pretty much with any design that you're working with, especially when your mat is brand new like this one. Okay. Now, I'm going to skip to, woo, magic, I've cut all my pieces. Okay. Let's find my folder with that. McKenna, do we have any questions yet that we need to answer? Or are we good to go?
Not quite, but if anybody has them, just drop them in the chat boxes and I'll go ahead and ask them later.
Oh, it's under my notes. There it is. Okay. So what I've got now is all my cut pieces by the magic of I cut them yesterday. Okay. So I have my first one, which is the one like I just now cut. And then the second layer is the deer. And then the third layer is the trees. The fourth layer is your hills. And then that back layer really is just a square. So the things that you can do while your pieces are cutting, you can cut that foam to get that ready to go. You can use your paper trimmer to trim this back square just so that you get everything ready to go more quickly. Okay. So I am going to pull out my blank frame and I'm going to start putting this one together. Okay. I know at home you may not have all your pieces cut. I totally get that. This is a class that you're going to want to watch again later on. So you'll be able to find it on Michael's YouTube channel. And I don't know if Silhouette's going to leave it on their YouTube channel, but let's go here. Okay. So now I've got my frame. And I've got my glass in there, but not the inner frame portion. All right. So the first thing I'm going to put in is my set of leaves. Now it can get tricky. You want to kind of look back at your design to make sure you're putting it in correctly. And you're going to put it in upside down or left different from what you see. So this is the front. I'm going to flip it over to put it so the front is facing the front of my frame. Okay, that's so pretty, just like that. You know what? You could take this, you could cut a little piece of vinyl with your initial and put it right in here. I just thought that, wouldn't it be so cute? Just like that. You could do that in a regular frame. This is a great free shape of the week. Okay, so now that I've got that, I'm going to take some of my little foam strips that I cut, and I'm going to start with one of my long ones. Now I'm hoping, let's see. I'm going to grab this one and lift it up so that you can see a little bit more easily what I'm doing. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my foam strip and I'm going to pull off the backing about halfway down. Okay. So I've got it halfway down. And then let's see if I can do it on the top. I'm going to take this and just lay it on the top of my cardstock. Now, the reason I put this in the frame is so that my cut piece does not start moving around. It's just a lot easier to do when it's not moving around. This is giving us a nice firm surface to work on. Then I'm going to gradually pull off more of the backing and lay it down until I get it all the way to the end. Now, if I didn't start well at that end or I didn't measure well, I might have a little extra there. So I can just go snip that off. There we go. Works great. Okay. Now I'm going to show you something here that happened with mine. See, I went a little off the edge with the foam. I might be tempted to try to pull that up and reposition it. I would not suggest that. One reason is this foam can stretch very easily. And then when it does that, it can distort the paper. So just leave it in there. You may have to maybe trim off. Can you see that there? Maybe trim off a little bit of that once you get all your pieces in of foam put on, but maybe not. Okay. You could also use the square pop dots for this. I would make sure you go all the way along the full edge. Okay. So let's get one of my longer pieces here. Gotta check my sizes. I keep pulling out short ones. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the opposite side and do my second piece. I'm going to show you how to put all these on so that you can catch up with some of the cutting if you need to. So I hope you can see that. I'm just laying it straight down onto the back of my leaves. Once again, I should have cut that a little shorter, so I'm just going to do that right now. Ooh, I cut it way too short, or way too long. I must have not been paying attention that day. Okay, see how that got wiggly right there? I don't want to move that, but see, what can happen is it begins to kind of make my paper wavy. So you want to be as careful as you can to try to get it on flat, but it's really probably going to be fine. Okay, I'm going to lay this down so I can be a little flatter. Let's put our third piece on. Going right down the side here. And I've got more I need to cut off. Bless you. Okay, and one more piece. Mine's a little sloppy because I'm rushing it a little bit, but I bet you're more careful at home. And you know what? Another reason I started with plain white cardstock, it's not expensive. And so it's a good, easy thing to play with. I think these foamy sheets are pretty inexpensive too. So it's, you know, if you need to just do some testing, shouldn't be a big problem. All So now I've got all 4 pieces of my foam on, even though they're not very straight. Trying to do it upside down to help you see is a little tricky. Okay, so there's my first piece. Now I'm going to take my deer. This is the way he needs to be shown. So I'm going to flip it over. I might have checked that the right way. Yeah, his antlers are that side. Okay. And I'm going to put that piece in. And then I would continue in the same way, adding foam on each piece. Okay. So we're going to pretend that these others have foam on them. Put in my trees, another layer of foam. Put in my hills, another layer of foam. And then put in my back piece. Okay. And then when I flip it over, oh, that's so pretty. That's so pretty. Okay. Can you see that white's really hard to capture, but it's just gorgeous. All right. Let me flip back over to the one that's already done so I can show you a couple things. Okay. So you see how, because we added that dimension, you get some of those shadows, and that makes it just really, really pop. Okay, now when we go to put these together, I'm going to show you this one. Actually, let's do on the deck. Let's pretend this is my other one. Okay. Because we've added so much thickness with the foam, we're not going to put the inner frame in. We're just going to put the back straight on. Okay. So after you've got all that extra, your inner frame would not actually fit in there. So what you do, you can just leave that one out. And then when you bend down your prongs, they're going to touch and be just fine. So we're going to do that. Now, let's add even more to this. Let me show you how to add some lights. Okay, I got these lights at Michael's because I got everything there. And what's cool about these is it has a 4-hour timer. And that means after you turn it on, so on the little switch here, I can turn it on this for timer. And after 4 hours, they're going to automatically turn off. How cool is that? Or you can just leave it on to leave it on. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and grab my spatula tool, if I can find it. Let's move these out so you can see. I'm going to go ahead and take the back off of this one, and you'll see that I don't have the inner frame in there. See, this spatula tool is handy for so many different things. If you don't have a spatula tool to pull those prongs up, you can use something like a flathead screwdriver. Whoop, I missed one here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the lights onto this back part here. And remember how I said save those little strips that were a little too bit smaller that we cut off the ends? That's what we're going to use right now. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a few of those short ones out of my box. And then I'm going to grab my lights. All right. I'm going to check to make sure where my hanging portion is. You might not hang this, but just to give yourself the option. So that's going to be the top. I want my lights to be toward the bottom. This direction. There we go. Okay. I want to make sure that there's a little bit of wiggle room when I put this back in the frame. I want the thin part of the wire, not this thick part here. Do you see that it's covered with plastic? You see that? Okay. I want that outside the frame. So I'm going to put inside the frame here. What I'm going to do is grab one of my sticky strips, pull that off. Okay. I'm going to put my lights down, and I'm going to put this sticky strip over a thin part. I'm not going to put it right on the light. I'm going to put it on the thin part here. Okay. And I'll let that just kind of hang. And then I'm going to put a second one on the other side. Okay. Then I'm going to start winding the lights back the other direction. And I can just use that foam to hold it. So that foam is not only holding these in place, it's also going to give us some separation from the back of our design. Okay, you see what I'm doing here? It's just so much easier. Okay, so see how that's just holding it really nicely in place. Let's go ahead and put some more on. I like also how these lights are on this cone shape, or what is it, cylinder shaped thing, so they don't get all tangled up. You know, sometimes you buy lights and they're all tangled up around the battery part. This one is lovely because they're not. Okay, so I'm going to continue to do that all the way around. All right, and we're going to pretend like I did them all. I would now take it and start going back this direction to add some more. Now when I grab my white pieces again, okay, I can just flip this over. I'm going to check where the top is. I flip this over and I can put it right inside. Then I can have the battery box out on the back side here. See that? Okay. And now look how that looks on the front. It's hard to really get in the daytime, but if the lights were off, you could see just how gorgeous it is. I think I've got it in some of my pictures. You getting a view of that at all? What I like about using the foam strips to attach the lights is that it keeps them from sitting right against the paper more. And then it's a little bit of a softer, more diffused light. Okay. So I'm going to turn my lights off because I want to save the batteries. And that's how we do our, I would, of course, pull my prongs back down. And then we're finished with our white shadow box. Okay. Are there any questions at this point before we jump to something else?
One question that we were wondering about is when you flip your mat over to peel the pieces off, does it curl the mat or does the mat stay nice and flat?
That's a great question. The mat stays nice and flat because it's made of plastic. It's more able to return to its original shape, whereas paper does not necessarily. If your pieces do curl, it's probably okay once you put them in the frame, but if you can minimize that as much as possible, that's just nicer. And that's for any project that you're working on. Okay. All right. Are you ready to go on to a new one? Okay, let's talk about the one with the colored cardstock. What I want to show you on this one, can I pull this up? Here we go. So you see something different on this one. See, you can see my hand behind there. This one, I left the back off, and see how pretty that is with just going straight through. Now let's see if you can put it in front of me here. Hi there. Okay, now you can see my shirt through. When you put this up on your mantle or on your wall or on a windowsill, this would be really pretty. You could put, if you wanted to add the lights, you would just add them all down in here so that they wouldn't be seen. Okay. So let's talk about how we can make it for the bigger frame, because this is obviously a 12 by 12 size. Oh, let me show you this one back here too. Do you see this one? We can zoom in on that. Okay. Here, I use that beautiful gold paper again, but I use it for the background, okay? And I'm going to show you in just a minute how I took 2 colors of the wood cardstock and made them into 4 colors. It's magic. Not really. Okay. So I'm going to go now back, clear off my workspace here. Does your workspace look like this? Mine kind of always looks like this big mess here. It's a creative mind. That's what it means. Okay. Let's go back into our software. All right. So now what I want to do is I want to change this to working with 12 by 12. So the first thing I'm going to do is change my media size to a 12 by 12. And that just means the size of the page. Now I want to resize all of my pieces, but I want to do them all at once. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select them all. I'm not going to get my little test cut square down there. And up in the quick access toolbar is a phenomenally wonderful tool. And it's right up in here. It looks like a little target with a plus sign in the middle. That's called centralize or center. And when I do that, it's going to align these pieces both vertically and horizontally with one click. So I'm going to click that. Boom. Now they're all centered together. Isn't that neat? And what's good about that is because they're all on top of one another, now I can resize them all together at the same time. You know that you can use the little corner boxes, but I like to be a little bit more exact than that. So you can do it up in the quick access toolbar like I showed you earlier. The other place you can do that, you can open the transform panel on the right side. It looks like a little bar graph. Okay. And with that, you can also do all of your align options, but the second one is going to be size. Okay, so look at my dimensions down here. I've got my lock on. I could unlock or lock that. I can backspace out the 8 inches and put 12 inches. And look at that. They all changed size at the same time because they were all lined up together. Okay, you can group them or leave them ungrouped. It doesn't really matter. Pull you off to the side here. Okay, now let's go with this piece this time. So I'm going to show you how I cut this with the cardstock. Okay. The other thing that you can remember how I said you could align something to the center of the page. If you just have the one piece selected, you can do that as well with this, lining it up on the page, both horizontally and vertically at the same time. So if I select that and then I go up in my quick access toolbar, or it would also be in the transform panel, there's the little, it looks like a page with a circle and a plus sign through it. It's kind of small to see, but it's called center to page. And when I click on that, it's going to put it right in the very middle of the page. Okay, so that's a handy trick to have. Now, let's think about this. You're going to measure the inside of your frame again. I've measured mine. I know that it is 12 by 12. Okay. I've got a piece that is 12 by 12. I do not want to make my, my piece any smaller than that 12 by 12. I could make it like 11.8, and then I have a little bit of margin that I could cut off all the way around my 12 by 12 paper. But then what happens is when you put it in the frame, it might shift slightly. Okay, so we're going to do something a little bit different. What I'm going to do is I am going to, don't be scared by this. It's actually very easy. I'm going to select my piece, and then I'm going to do a right click and release the compound path. Now, what the compound path is means in this design, say the spaces between the branches, they're not separate pieces. They're actually holes in the original. If I pull this off to the side, see how you can see the gray through it over here? That means that those are the holes, okay? Because this is a compound path. A compound path is where you have some lines that are all part of a single piece, a single line, even if they're not touching one another, okay? So by releasing it, I do separate it out. Let me change the line color so hopefully you can see a little bit better. Okay, so do you see that? Now those pieces between the trees are separate pieces. So if you ever have a design where you want to separate it out and you can't ungroup, what you do is release the compound path. You can do that, as I said, with the right click. You can also do it in the object drop-down window or in the modify panel, okay, which is one of the best panels in the software. You could do make and release compound paths there, okay? If you don't understand it all, don't worry about it. Just know that what you need to do is release the compound path. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to get rid of that outside square. Okay, so now what my machine is going to do is cut all the internal pieces, but it won't have to cut the outside square, and it'll be exactly 12 by 12 because that's the size of my paper. Okay, now I do want to do a test cut because I'm going to show you how to work with some textured papers like the cardstock, the textured gold and white cardstock. I'm going to fill my test square with a color because that makes it easier to grab. And this time I'm going to put it right on top of the other color. Okay, so we have to think about this here. The parts that we see in white are the ones that we're gonna keep. The parts that we see in brown are the ones that we're going to get rid of. So we can put that green square inside the brown and do our test cut there. So let me grab the right paper. Now, what's different about a paper like this is that it's textured, okay? And that means it's a different thickness at different points in the paper. So we got to do a couple little things to just account for that, okay? So I'm going to put it on my mat. And another thing to think about with these papers is they do have a grain, just like a wood grain. So you can decide if you want it like this or like this, okay? And you can even get a different look using the same paper in the same frame by turning it this way and this way, or even by flipping it all the way around, okay? So think about that when you're putting it on. I'm going to put mine on with the texture going vertically, right? And I'm going to load it into my machine. There we go. All right. Now I'm going to share my screen with you again and show you what I'm going to do in my cut settings. Okay. So I'm going to go over to my send area. And once again, I want this square to cut and the rest of the pieces I want to no cut. And this time, oops, I want to no cut on that one also. This time I'm going to use the setting called Cardstock Textured. That's for a little bit heavier paper, okay? We're going to go ahead and do a test cut, but I'm going to tell you what I used. I had to bump it up to a blade number of 4 and a force of 30. Just because that's what I had to use does not mean that's what you're going to use. Each piece of paper is different. The blade, the condition of your mat, the piece of paper can all alter what settings you need to have here. That's why we always do a test cut. I've been using Silhouette machines for more than 10 years, probably I think 12 now, 13, and I always test cut just because I save time and money that way, okay? So the trick with textured cardstock is to do 2 passes. So see over here, this passes. I'm going to bump that up to 2. That means it's going to cut this 2 times, okay? And that's because we have inconsistent thicknesses, and so that's going to help with that. So I'm going to send that test cut. And you heard that cut it 4 times. I'm going to check. Came out beautifully. So now I can go back over to my software. And I am going to set that to no cut. And I'm going to set all the rest of the pieces on cut. The red line means it's going to cut. The green square doesn't have a red line on it. It's not going to cut. So I'm going to send that, and it's going to cut my tree piece. Okay, now I want to show you while that's cut. Sound back on now? We good? How are we doing? We have sound? Okay, we're good to go. If you missed anything, just pop it in the questions and McKenna will try to help me get to those. Look at this cool paper I found at Michael's. Doesn't that look like a neat sky background? Okay, that would be gorgeous in here. You could put it this direction for a day. You could put it this direction for a little bit more of an evening time. You could put some watercolor paper that you paint on. There's just all kinds of options. Okay. Another option that you could do is you could put the back on. You can actually leave the glass off. Let me show you something you can do with that. You can take your leaves that are, say, the front piece, and you can use your spatula tool, another tool, to kind of curl them like this. Maybe you do all of them, maybe you don't. Just kind of curling my leaves. And let's get the blank frame here. All right, here I am. I'm going to take my glass out. Set that off to the side. And I could put my leaves piece in like this and see how that would pop out beyond the frame. Makes it kind of even more of a 3D project. You could put it that way, or you could put your inner frame in and then put your piece, whoops, flip it around. Okay, and then your leaves are popping out sort of within the frame. Okay, see that? So you can do that if you want to leave the glass off the front. So you have so many different options here. Okay, so I'm going to check my cut because this was a new paper. Math. Oh, beautiful. Let's see how that double cut help me get just a perfect cut right off the bat. Okay, so pull the whole thing off here. This paper is a little sturdier, so I could do that without flipping it over. You can also hold it this direction and pull. If you don't like flipping it over on your work surface, you can hold it in this direction and just curl the mat off the paper. Catching that? So that is another option. Okay. Now we pop this piece out and see how cool that looks, like a tree. Love it. Okay. Let's put this one off to the side and let me show you what I promised on this one about how we get the different colors. Okay. So I'm going to grab some more of my papers. Once I find them, here we are. Okay, so I used for the leaves, the deer, the tree, and the hills, I used only 2 colors. Okay, so how do you get different colors? See if I can find my scratch pieces here. Like I said, this is kind of what my craft room looks like all the time. We're just going to go with it. Hannah, do we have any questions while I'm looking for this? Okay. Are we still with me? Have we gotten overwhelmed? Don't worry if you get overwhelmed, because you're going to be able to watch this class as many times as you want on the YouTube channels. Here we go. Okay. So here I've got a couple of pieces of the pieces that I weeded out. I don't throw those away because sometimes I can use them again. But what we're going to do this time is we're going to actually color some of these papers. Okay. So I'm going to get out. I make a mess in my craft room, so I like to use a piece of little cardboard. I'm going to set that down. And let's grab this piece right here. Okay. I like to test on something like this. And what I'm going to do is actually color it with some inks. Okay. I'm using the Ranger Distress Inks by Tim Holtz. They come, which is really cool, they come 4 to a pack. Okay. So with this pack, I got 3 browns and a black. Okay. You could use one of the greens in the green pack to do the leaves with if you wanted to. Okay. So what I'm going to do, there's a couple of different ways to do this. Just checking my stuff here. Okay. I'm going to take one of my ink pads. Okay. The one I'm using is Vintage Photo. And I'm going to take just a regular little sponge. I cut a piece off of a round sponge here. And I'm going to rub it. And then I'm going to begin to rub it on my paper. And you see, I hope you can see there, how I'm already getting a bit of a different color. Let me hold that up. Can you see there that I'm getting a bit of a different color here? I can do that. I could get the walnut stain and do that one. Okay. I could mix the two. I could mix in some black, but now I've got more than just the 2 wood tones because I'm adding some ink. Now, I will say that some of these papers have a coating on them and the ink rubs off. So another thing that you can do is just flip it over. Okay. And with this, you can do one of 2 things. You can take your ink pad and rub it across. See how I'm hitting the wood texture on the back? Okay, so that's a way I could get a different color. Or You're here, you know, you've got some of the white down in the grooves there. Say you didn't want that. That's when you use the sponge. So see why you keep these extra pieces around to kind of test on and say, not sure if I like that color. Maybe I'll try the antique linen and see how that looks. Okay, that's got a little bit more of a yellow tone to it. Okay, so that's the way that you can get different colors on a single piece of paper. Okay, if you do it on the front and you have it, you start to see it kind of rub off because it's got a coating on it, you can let it dry for a while. You can hit it with a fixative, like a spray art fixative. You can also put something like a glaze over it to kind of hold it in place. But once you put it in your frame, it's not going to rub off anyway. So it's just going to maybe make your fingers messy while you're working. Okay. So that is how we did this one. I'll show you that one again. That's how I did that one, just with those two colors of the wood textured paper and using the inks. Okay. All right, now let's go on to our wood toned one. Okay, so here we're going to cut the wood paper, and really we're just going to do the same types of things that we've done. We're just going to do something slightly different for working with that wood paper. Okay, so I'm going to pull my pieces off the mat here, a nice clean mat. And this is one where you're really, really going to want to do some testing first, because the wood is a natural product. It's going to want to cut differently for different people. Different pieces are going to be slightly different in texture. So let's grab. Yeah, do I have in here somewhere? Where's that adhesive? Okay, I have a pack of the wood paper here. Everybody see that? So we'll go back to our favorite. McKenna, any questions? Okay. Good to go. You should see this desk under here. It is a complete mess, but that's okay. Oh, here we go. Got it. Okay. So remember that I want to leave this in the pack until I'm ready to use it. So for right now, I am going to go back to my software. Okay. Now I need to get back down to the 8x8 size. So what I'm going to do is just undo button. Watch this. Undo a few times until I have my design. You can completely start over with your design, or you can use the undo button, whatever works for you. Okay. I want to get all those pieces lined up together. So I'm going to select them all. And remember that cute little button, centralize them. Okay. And while they're still like that, I want to resize them. Okay, now they're all 8x8 again. And I'm going to go back and change my paper size to a letter size. Okay. Now, as you're thinking about this wood paper, you want to know that it's really like a veneer, a wood veneer. And so you're going to have a grain to it, just like on any wood. Okay. And we'll pull it out of the pack in a sec so you can see it. So you're going to want to think about which way you want that grain. Okay. Now, I will tell you that for this material, you're going to need a really good blade and you're going to need a really good mat, because it's real wood and it's gorgeous to work with, but it can be a little tricky to cut. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a piece out of my pack. Put it on my mat. And one of the things in working with this material is it can have a tendency to curl like this. So what you can do is, like I said, leave it in the pack until you're ready to go. When you're putting on your mat, I like to put it on the bottom part of my mat, and I like to do it in landscape. Okay, I just find it works better that way. What can happen if it starts to curl on you is it can actually curl the mat, and then that catches on the mechanisms in the machine. You get a real mess. So you want it to be nice and flat. That's why that new mat helps. You can also use a little bit of washi tape around the edges to hold it down, just to keep it really secure. But it does have that backing on it, so you should be good to go. All right. Another thing you can do if you have a piece that's curled because you took out of the package or whatever, what you can do is spray it with a little bit of water and then put it between a couple of towels, lay some heavy books on it, and leave it that way for a couple of days until it gets nice and flat again, and then put it on your mat and you should be ready to go. Okay. It's the humidity, I think, that does that. So anyway, another thing that I like to do to help on the machine is the Cameo 4 has a built-in roll feeder. If I can pull that out just about halfway, that gives my mat a little bit of support since this is a heavier material. So that's the way that I like to do it. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my screen here. And now I said that I want to cut my piece of material at the bottom of my mat, but there's not really a way to do that, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to lie to my machine. I'm going to tell it that I'm actually using 12 by 12 paper. I'm really not, but then I can turn on my grid and I know where my inches are, and I can put my piece down near the bottom. Okay. So what I did there was I just told it, even though I'm using 8.5 by 11 paper, I told the machine I was using 12 by 12. And then I just made sure to use the grid lines to check my placement. Okay. Now the cut settings, you will need to test for yourself. Okay. But what I ended up using, let's get down here. I'm going to scroll down, and you're going to always start with your default settings and then go from there. I'm going to start with, it's called wood paper. It's at the very bottom of your materials list. Okay. This is like vinyl. It has the wood paper has an adhesive sticky back on it. And then that's on a carrier. So you want to cut through the wood, but not the backing paper. I will tell you that if you cut through the backing paper, it's fine. If you don't cut all the way through the wood, it's not fine. So if you go one direction or the other, it's okay if you've cut through it a little bit. In fact, on some of mine, you can see that I've cut partially through the back. That's okay. It makes it a little bit trickier to weed, but it cut just fine. I know that it's cut all the way through. Okay. Right, so now I ended up using a blade of 6, a force of 33, and I did 3 passes. Again, the multiple passes you use when you have a material that has varying thickness throughout it. I think we're getting the old auto load thing here. There we go. Okay. So I've placed mine on my mat. Okay. You can see I've got it on my mat into my machine here. And then I'm going to go over to my software, and I am going to do a test cut. Okay. I would do a test cut like normal in the middle. I've already test cut this morning, so I'm just going to go straight to cutting my paper, but I am going to send that to cut. Okay, so while that is cutting and going away, and it's going to sound a little crazy because it's going through wood, don't freak out. If it begins to get stuck and caught in there, that means either your blade number or your force is too deep. So you always want to start on the low side of your settings, because if you don't unload, you can just bump them up a little and send it again. But if you start too high on your settings, you're going to ruin your piece of material. So always start on the low side. That's what I did when I was playing with the different settings. Okay. All right, now, while that is cutting, I'm going to show you a piece that I cut earlier, okay, and show you how we're going to weed this. Normally, I would leave this on my mat to weed it just so that it's a firmer surface, but my mat's being used right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to lift it off. Now, do you see this nice big piece of wood paper? I don't really want to waste that. So what I'm going to do temporarily is grab the cover for my mat, and it's got a shiny side, the side that goes down on the sticky part of the mat, and I'm going to just put it right there. I'm going to leave it there until I'm finished weeding completely and finished getting my design off. And then I can put it back on this piece of paper and save it for another project. Okay. Another thing that you're going to do is you're going to have a nice long strip here on the bottom if you're cutting in the 8x8 size. So I am going to jump in and trim that off. So that I have a strip that I can use on another project. Okay, so let's take and weed these extra pieces here. She said confidently. Okay, again, I'm going to be using my spatula tool. See here at the corner, it's just not quite cut all the way through. It must have been a little bit thicker piece of wood. What I can do is take my spatula and kind of coax it, okay? So I'm taking off the outside here, the part that's around the outside of my frame, okay? Just get rid of that. Any pieces, like that piece was too small to save. Well, maybe you could use this as a frame on something else. This one might be one to save, okay? That's where I cut through the backing, but it's not a huge deal because that means I know that my wood was cut all the way through. If you have any parts that are kind of not coming apart from your design, what you can do is take your spatula tool or a weeding tool and just kind of slide it underneath. Sometimes at the corners, you will get a bit of a stick, and you can use that spatula tool to just get that off of there, okay? So let's take off another big piece here. See, it's sticking right there just at my little corner. I'm going to slide my spatula under and coax it out, okay? I did also, I forgot to mention this, but I did use the line segment overcut setting and bumped it up to 0.2. What that does is as the machine is cutting, when it gets to a corner, it goes just a tiny, tiny fraction past the corner, then picks up the blade, starts a tiny, tiny fraction before the new direction that it's going to go, and then goes back in. What that gives you is a nice crisp corner, and you make sure that it's cut all the way through. Okay. So here I have my trees. Now I'm going to cut one of my other pieces in this color. So I want to do the same thing with this wood paper. I found on this the sponges to work best. So I would do that one. See, I'm going to leave it on this backing paper so that it's not going to get to be a mess all over my work area. I could also put my piece of scratch paper under it if I wanted to, but either way works. Okay, so I'm going to take one of my inks and I'm going to rub my sponge on there. And I'm just going to rub it on the wood sheets. Take it again, rub it again, and just keep doing that all the way over. So you see how now I've got a different color, which makes it really fun. Okay, our piece is done. This is definitely something you want to check the cut on before you unload. So I'm going to reach over here. I like to kind of curl the mat downward to see if that corner is going to pop up. It's popping up beautifully. So I know that I can unload. In fact, this whole thing, let's move this out of the way. This whole piece is in an area where I could reach it. So I could go ahead and weed out everything while it's still in my machine. And then if I really had to, I could send it back through for another cut to make sure it's cut on some of those other portions. Okay. So I know this is cut fine, so I'm going to go ahead and unload. All right. Now, I, again, have those magic pieces already cut out. So let me show you how we would put this one together. I take my frame, and on this one, we are not going to use the foam for dimension, okay? To me, this gives it the look more of inlaid wood, and the pieces are gonna stick together to one another. You could do that if you wanted to. If you did that, if you wanted to add the dimension with the foam, you could do a couple of different things. I didn't have great luck with either one of them, but one thing that you can do is put your piece of wood paper on a piece of plain cardstock and then cut it out. And then the back is not sticky and you could add the foam dots. Okay. This was a little bit trickier to find the right cut setting. So I decided that wasn't my favorite way to do it. Plus I did not want the dimension, but I thought I'd show you how you could. All right. Another thing that you can do is cut out the wood paper and then cut out the same thing in a piece of cardstock, laying it on there together. I don't know if you can see this, but I'm not great at getting it on straight. So I've got a little bit of overlap there. So I chose not to do it that way, but that is an option if you decide you want to. Okay, so I'm going to put my piece of glass back in because I do want that. And then I'm just going to begin one at a time. I'm going to take my deer, excuse me, the leaves. The leaves go in the front. Okay, so I'm going to take my leaves. I'm going to gently pull it off the backing paper. This is going to be floppy. It's not going to be quite like a piece of cardstock. Yes and no. I'm going to take this off. Now, see, I'm going to have that backing paper free to save some of my scraps. The reason we're putting this in the frame to do it is because that's going to give us a nice, solid, rigid surface. Okay, so I'm going to take it and I'm just going to lay it down inside my frame. Okay, then I'm going to take my next piece, and the biggest trick is just making sure you get it on right. Okay, so I need to go this way. I'm going to pull my deer off. Okay, and you kind of got one shot to do this because they're going to stick to one another. So I kind of start at the most rigid edge, which for the deer is this bottom piece. and I lay it against the edge of the frame. I'm not sure if you can see, I'm laying this against the inside of the frame and then gently putting it down on top of the leaves. Okay. And then I'm just going to gradually put that down. Okay, do you see? Now those are the same color because I didn't color these leaves, but this is kind of how you're going to get the look. Whoop. Then you're going to keep going with your other pieces. So the trees would be next. Let's do these trees here. These are the ones that are already on the cardstock, so I'm just going to use those for the heck of it. So we don't have to take time weeding my other piece. Okay. And then we've got our hills background. Okay. I'll lay that in there. This would be sticky and they'd all be sticking to one another, but we're just using those other pieces for now. Your back piece, your sky, basically what's the sky piece, is just an 8x8 square. So you can just cut that whenever you want to. You don't have to cut that on the machine. You can do that while the machine is cutting because it does take a while to cut the wood paper. So I would lay that piece in there. Okay. And then you're going to want to put, because when you don't have I would pull this off, it would be sticky on the back. So I would want to get rid of, I would want to cover that stickiness. So I just take another piece of craft paper and lay that down in there. And then I can put on my back. And this time I could use the inner frame if I wanted to, because I don't have the dimension. And you see how we're getting the look of different pieces of wood there. It's just extremely pretty. Love that piece. Okay. And that's kind of how we've made. Let me show you that one more time. That's what it looks like in progress. And here's the one, how it looks with all the different colored pieces of wood. Okay. I know I shared just a ton of information with you. That's the great thing about this. You can go back and watch it as many times as you want. Do we have any quick questions, McKenna, before we go? Okay, great. Thank you for being here. I would love to see your projects, so you can post them with the hashtag Make It With Michaels. You can post them with the hashtag Michaels Classes. You can post them with the hashtag silhouette.inc, or you can use my hashtag Silhouette Smarts, because my blog is called Smart Silhouette. Remember, you can watch this class again on YouTube later. There are lots and lots of free classes that Michaels does, a lot of silhouette ones, a lot of great ones. So make sure to take advantage of that. And find me on my blog. And I would love to see your projects, so make sure you post them.